Good evening and welcome once again to another program of Issues in the News, where we discuss the important events that would have taken place in our country over the past week or so. And as is the norm in Guyana, we always have a large number of issues for discussion. So, welcome once again to another program of Issues in the News, and I want to begin by recognizing and welcoming all those persons who are joining us on television from West Coast Berbice and other parts of Region 5, persons who are joining us on television from Region 6 in East Berbice and then along the Quarantine Coast. Welcome to another program of Issues in the News. Also, I want to welcome those of us, those of you who are joining us from Freedom Radio from Rob Street, Georgetown. Welcome to another program of Issues in the News. And last but not least, I want to welcome each and every one of you joining us from across the length and breadth of Guyana, from across the Caribbean and North America who are joining us on Facebook Live. Welcome to another program of Issues in the News. And as is usual, I want to engage you a little. So I will take a look at the live feed and welcome all of you. Shakira LXC, Patricia Bruley, Soma Bipat, Vijay Lacha, Shafir Mohammed Khan, Betty Hansram, Becky Kumar, Ray Maxwell, Neetu Singh Maharaj, Krishna Baldev from Canada, Savitri Warnot, Melvin Mohan, Shanti Dokram from Canada, Debbie Ghani, and I saw Onik Prasad from, I think she's out of Atlanta, Georgia, Rajendra Mahes, and so many of you who are joining us tonight. Welcome, 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 and please ensure that you press that share button on your phone or on your computer so that this program can be shared. Press that share button on your Facebook account, on your Facebook page, as the case may be, so that this program can be shared with all your friends and followers so that we can have the largest possible audience. Omar Sharif, Rina Samaru, Dharam Raj Budu, Stan Vini, Sunil Girwar, Barry Sanchara, and so many of you are joining us from across Guyana, from across the US, from across Canada, from across the Caribbean, New Jersey. I see so many people joining us. Please ensure that more and more people join us by sharing this live feed, by pressing that share button on your Facebook account and or on your Facebook page so that more of your friends and followers can join us in tonight's discussion. Tonight's discussion will be a light one because there are a couple of things that happened that maybe are a little humorous, if one can describe them as such, or at least the first one that I'll begin with, and that is there is an issue trending on the social media and reported in the mainstream media as well. It arose out of an incident or an engagement that occurred last night at the Georgetown Club on Camp Street, where the European Union hosted an event to celebrate Europe Day. I was invited to the event, but because of other clashing engagements, I was unable to attend. At that event, the opposition leader was present, and The Vice President was present. Many other important dignitaries were there. Many members of our government were present. Many members of the opposition were present. The diplomatic community were present. And I'm sure many other significant office holders in our country were present. And in an engagement with the opposition, with the Vice President, opposition leader Mr. Aubrey Norton disclosed that he has in his possession the statements of poll for APNU AFC relating to the last elections held on March the 2nd, 2020, my apologies. Norton not only claims that he has possession of those mysterious and missing documents, but that he will make them public, and even more fundamentally, that they will establish, or that they establish, that the APNU AFC won the 2020 March 2nd elections. Now, each of these statements are of earth-shattering importance. Mr. Norton has the reputation of being an experienced, an intelligent, and a shrewd politician. And I don't wish to deny Mr. Norton those attributes. In fact, while I may not know whether he possessed those characteristics personally, I am prepared to give him the benefit of the doubt. But Mr. Norton, by his constant public disclosures, have me doubting the benefit of the doubt which I am so charitably and so trustingly reposing in him. Because every time in recent times he makes a public disclosure, it decries those attributes. And he makes himself, his disclosures, and his office more and more incredible and incredulous. Now, let us examine the disclosures that Norton has made last night. He must have been aware that television cameras and perhaps cell phone cameras were focused on him, and they were recording as he was speaking. Yet he chose to make the statements attributed to him. And in fact, those statements are recorded. So it's not a question now of whether he made them or he did not make them. We have to accept that he has made them. And I haven't seen any attempt from him or by him to distance himself from those disclosures. So the first disclosure is that he has possession of these statements of poll, that he will disclose them. And secondly, that they contain information that support the contention that the APNU AFC won the elections. Now, for 5 long months, while this country was gripped in turmoil, agony, anguish, chaos, confusion, and legal battle, while this country perched precariously on the precipice of a possible collapse, while the Constitution was under siege, while the rule of law was held at ransom, and while constant and continuous attempts were being made to distort and trample upon the will of the people as expressed in the ballot boxes, Mr. Norton and his party refused to disclose these statements of poll that would have put these matters to rest and would have bring calm, order, and normalcy to the country. It must be extraordinarily strange why these statements of poll were not being made public, and up to now have not been made public, especially since, according to Mr. Norton's party, from the inception, they won the elections. They continue to say so until now. And they are out of government. But they have the statements of poll which say that they won the elections, yet for some unfathomable reason, for some indecipherable and unintelligible reason, they continue to hide these statements of poll and are refusing to make them public. The PPP, within hours, made their statements of poll public and made the public pronouncements that based upon those statements of poll, they won the elections. The sensible, logical, correct, and simplest thing for Mr. Norton and his party to have done during then that time and even now would have been to disclose their statements of poll by which they are claiming that they won those elections. But they did not do so. Their supporters called upon them to do so. Those calls fell on deaf ears. The international community called upon them to do so. Those calls fell on deaf ears. Public commentators and the diplomatic community called upon them to do so, and those calls fell on deaf ears. 2.5 years after, Mr. Norton now tells us that he has the statements of poll and that they show that the APNU AFC won the elections. And even after Mr. Norton has done so, and after his promise to make it public, he has not yet done so. One cannot discount from this equation the fact that 2 election petitions were filed by Mr. Norton's party challenging the results of those elections. Two, not one, two. In neither of those petitions did Mr. Norton and his party seek to attach as exhibits or put in as evidence a single statement of poll, though Mr. Norton says he has them, and though Mr. Norton says they will establish that his party won the elections. But not one of those statements of poll was led into evidence, was presented in the petition, or were attached to the petition as would have been possible. That the statements of poll were not part of Mr. Norton's party's case when they presented their case to the court. It is now trite and public knowledge that they lost both petitions. But now, Mr. Norton wants the country to believe that he has them and that they established that his party won the elections. Now, if this is not a bizarre disclosure, and the fact that they were not made public, and up to now they are not made public, is also not a bizarre occurrence, inexplicable on logical and rational grounds, then it simply means that Mr. Norton is crassly lying. And that goes to the core of his credibility. And he does so again, as his party did in Ashmin's building in 2020, and for 5 long months after. He does so on camera. He does so for the full view of the world. He does so at an event hosted by the diplomatic community. How can one take an opposition leader and his party seriously in those circumstances and for those reasons? You tell me how. They continue to accuse the government of being an installed government. They continue to regard the government as an unlawful government. Yet they have within their possession the documents that can showcase to the world how and why the government is illegal, but they are keeping that to themselves. And they are not disclosing that to the world, but they expect people to take them seriously. You see the predicament that they are not only presenting for themselves, but the predicament that they are putting their supporters in. Look at the embarrassment and humiliation and ridicule to which they are subjecting their poor supporters. These are people whom they told that they won the elections, but are not even showing those people the evidence of the victory, the basis of the victory. It is in that statement of poll. They're not telling that to their own supporters. They're not showing that to the leadership of their party. Mr. Granger said publicly that he never saw the statements of poll. I believe Comrade Ramjatan may have also said the same thing. But Mr. Norton, in a lucid interval, that's how you have to describe it, in a lucid interval, in a eureka moment, decides that he will make this grand disclosure and he would remove all the darkness and mystery that surrounds the PPP's victory at the polls. Well, Mr. Norton, you have done what you have done. You have said what you have said. And again, you have said it on camera. You have showcased yourself and your party to the world. You have brought back fresh to the minds of the Guyanese people the raw and naked trauma that your party put them through. 2.5 years later, you continue with this ridiculous narrative and you expect to be taken seriously by your political foe. You expect to be taken seriously by the international community. You expect to be taken seriously by the objective bystander. You expect to be taken seriously by your own supporters. I am disappointed. I expected better from Mr. Norton. I really am disappointed. But that is what it is. Mr. Norton is charting his own course. And he is digging his own grave. And he is making a spectacle of himself. And by extension, his political party and its supporters. It is the supporters, my Guyanese brothers and sisters, for whom I feel. Not necessarily Mr. Norton. It is the large number of persons whom they are disrespecting in this process, whom they are embarrassing in this process, whom they are humiliating in the process. Those are the persons whom I hold empathy and sympathy for. But that is what it is. So let me go back briefly to engage you. There are some comments here which I don't want to repeat. They are paying tribute to Mr. Norton in some very, very colorful language. I don't want to sully the program by repeating them. But Sally Jones says each time APNU makes a public appearance is to embarrass themselves and the handful of supporters they still have. How can I quarrel with such a contention? People don't believe Norton, AFA, PAP, and UFC rigged elections. Well, we know that. Can the police question him? Imagine an application had to have been made to the Chief Justice of the country for us to get a copy of GCOM's SOPs secured in the court. An application had to have been made to the Chief Justice, who made an order directing GCOM to lodge in the court a copy of the statements of poll. GCOM's statements of poll that were in GCOM's position. So I thought that I would reflect a little on Mr. Norton's statement or statements because they are of importance and they are important to the body politic of Guyana, and it is important for the democratic apparatus of this country that we interrogate statements of the type made by Mr. Norton so that we can continue to preserve, protect, and advance our democratic processes, machineries, and credentials. And that brings me to the related issue of the draft of the electoral laws. The process, as you may be aware, has commenced and is ongoing, and one set of the draft amendments to the Representation of the People Act have been completed and have been circulated for public consumption, public consultation, public scrutiny, and an invitation was extended to members of the public as well as important stakeholder organizations to submit recommendations, suggestions, proposed amendments, and or their views on those proposed amendments. And we received a response to that invitation. And yesterday, we invited, first of all the persons and organizations from whom submissions were received pursuant to the invitation sent. And yesterday I met with them after inviting them to a meeting. We met at the boardroom of the Attorney General Chambers. My colleague, Minister Gail Teixeira, was out of the country, so I conducted the meeting, and I met with the Private Sector Commission and a grouping calling themselves the Electoral Reform Group. Those were the only two groups that attended the meeting. So we went through their respective recommendations and thoroughly interrogated them and examined them. I also took the opportunity of explaining the nature and purport of the proposed amendments, the rationale for the amendments, and how the amendments will impact positively upon strengthening the electoral machinery. I also detailed the limitations of the engagement by highlighting the fact that this aspect of the reform will not address constitutional matters because those matters will require a two-thirds majority. And this is a government-driven process. We do not have a two-thirds majority in the National Assembly. So what we are concerned about here are reforms to the statutory provisions touching and concerning the elections, the Registration Act and the Representation of the People Act in particular. I pointed out that issues regarding constitutional reform will have to be addressed when the constitutional reform process begins, and that process will begin shortly. So those issues were made clear, and I believe we had a very lively and interactive engagement, and both organizations expressed support in a broad way for the process, though they feel that we should also move towards constitutional amendments and consider proposals that they have made in that regard. For example, changing the political system, restructuring GCOM and those issues. Those are matters for the Constitution. Those are not matters for statutory reforms. So those are outside of the scope of the mandate of this current exercise. So the consultative process is continuing. The second set of reforms or proposed reforms relating to the Registration Act shall be made public within a matter of days, as the work have been essentially completed in draft form. That will also be sent out using a similar mechanism, sent out publicly and inviting public consultation and recommendation and views, and another physical engagement will be arranged with those who made submissions so that the process can advance. We will also be meeting the Guyana Elections Commission. And when I say we, I mean the government of Guyana, or those representing the government of Guyana, including yours truly. We'll be meeting with the Guyana Elections Commission and go through these amendments with them. The Guyana Elections Commission, of course, is an important stakeholder organization, and we are going to treat with them differently. They have also made many recommendations and many proposals for amendments. Their submissions will be comprehensively dealt with and at an engagement which we will have shortly. So that is a process which I thought that I will update you on. Saturday, I, along with my colleague, Minister of Housing, Colin Crowell, conducted an outreach on the Essequibo coast to deal with a number of issues affecting communities, not families, communities along the coast relating to lands. There are many, many villages across this country, and in particular on the Essequibo coast, where persons have been living on plots of land and cultivating plots of land for decades. Their foreparents were doing that, and their parents and grandparents, and now they are there, and their children are there, but for whatever reason, they were never issued with titles for those lands. Our government has been executing an ongoing process through various agencies, including the Ministry of Housing and the Ministry of Legal Affairs and the Attorney General Chambers, in a joint effort to bring regularization to the occupation of these persons, and I'm speaking about hundreds, if not thousands of them across the country, and to ensure in the end they get their titles or transports, as the case may be. Persons are frustrated, and I understand, because the process is an expensive one, it's a tedious one, and it's a painfully long one. And it takes time. But we are pushing ahead with it, and substantial progress is being made. We are doing similarly for villages on the west coast of Berbice, using different mechanisms. Cotton Tree, number 1 village, number 2 village, and I believe number 3 village are villages that have been identified for this type of work to be undertaken with the residents. Number 46 village on the Quarantine Coast is another village similarly affected, where we have commenced work. And we are working also through the agency of the Sugar Welfare Fund to regularize and to give titles to pockets of former employees of Gaisuku who have been allocated lots by Gaisuku for which transports and titles were never issued. So it's a multi-faceted approach directed to various communities across the country with the intention of eventually titling those lands that are being occupied by residents for decades without a title. As I am on the question of land, perhaps I should briefly offer some views on the Linden housing issue. Now, my understanding is that in 2021, our government allocated some 400 house lots to residents at Amelia Ward's Linden. 400 in 1 year. I don't believe that in the entirety of the 5 years that APNU, AFC, Warren government, they did 400 house lots anywhere, more so Linden. Let me repeat. In 2021, the People's Progressive Party Civic Administration allocated 400 house lots at Amelia Ward's Linden to Lindeners. 400. APNU did nothing close to that. In fact, at a cabinet outreach, which I was a part of, done late last year, I had cause to keep a meeting in what is called the mines, Komaka mines. And at that meeting, I was standing in a huge empty expanse of land overgrown by bushes. I was standing in a playfield, and there was this huge open field overgrown with bushes. And the residents were telling me that just days before the elections, that bushed area that I'm looking at, that looked like a forest, was the area that they were allocated as house lots weeks and days before the elections. No survey, no demarcation, no allotment done. And I am not even getting into drainage and road and street lights. I mean, we are far away from that. They didn't even weed the place. They didn't even survey the place. They didn't even mark the place out. But they told the people that you're getting house lots over there and point to the bushed area. That is what the residents of the mines, the Komaka mines, told me when I met with them last year. Now back to the 400 lots at Amelia Wards. Now this where my information is, where this land is located, you have to build a roadway to access the land. As of December 2021, that's December last year, the CHNPA team went on the ground to conduct what is called an occupational survey to demarcate the road now that will allow the 400 persons to gain access to their land. So this is the main road that will be taking you to the plot of land where the 400 lots were allocated. In December, the road was carved out. December 2021. When the team returned a few weeks ago, persons had erected fence and structures. Squatters have erected structures on this land. 2 were residential structures, two, and the rest were sheds, fences, and just parts of a piece of wood and so on put alongside. It was done only a few weeks ago when it was made public that the housing people are coming in there to do the road. So the housing officials attempted to remove the structures. APNU AFC, as usual, exploited the situation, sent in their supporters there and their activists to claim that 40 homes were demolished. Complete and utter lie. Two structures which can be categorized as residential were demolished. Two. The rest were fence and pieces of wood and so on alongside the way. And made it a huge political issue. Of course, playing the race card very subtly, because that is all that they know to do. They never give the people any land. We have given 400 house lots. Now we are building the road, and I have no doubt that they had a hand in encouraging persons to go and squat on the roadway, thereby preventing 400 persons, 400 families from enjoying their house lots and getting the infrastructure needed to construct their houses. That is what these people are doing to their own supporters. I am not going to get into whether the people of Linden or the 400 voted for the PPP or not. That's not an issue. They are Guyanese, they are entitled to house lots, and they are benefiting, like every other Guyanese, from the government's housing projects and programs. But this grouping cannot see that happening. All they see is the narrow prism of politics and the need to undermine everything that the government does, in particular in areas where they believe they own the people. So they believe that they own the people of Linden. So if the government goes in there to do any infrastructural work or to give house lots, they don't care that it's their supporters that may be benefiting. That is not their concern. Their concern is that the government must not deliver goods and services to the people. So the people must punish so that they can win some Pyrrhic political victory. That is the narrow-minded selfishness that have characterized the PNC politics for decades. And nothing is changing. Nothing. So I am getting Navi Chand is with us, Onik Prasad, I mentioned that earlier. Fazlur Ali is watching us from Montreal, Canada. And the show goes on. So please let me hear your comments, let me see you participating so that we can continue this interactive engagement. So I just thought that I will dwell a little on the Linden housing issue that they have magnified into an ethnic matter and a matter of ethnic discrimination, because that's the only horse that they can jump upon. Fortunately, the housing officials went down into Linden, met with the people, and all those people are now going to be relocated and are going to get house lots as well. Those people who they put to be obstacles have now become part of the housing program. And that is how we respond to issues that arise. And that is why we are right across this country every single day addressing the concerns of people of every geographic location and of every ethnic grouping, whether they voted or supported the PPP. So last week, the president of Brazil visited Guyana, and a number of important agreements were executed, and a number of important memoranda of understanding were discussed and signed, creating platforms for trade relations on legal issues, on transportation issues, with transformational road linkages, railway linkages, deepwater harbor discussions, and great assistance in the agro sector, where crops such as soya, beans, and wheat will be explored. Also, a different variety of rice described as upland rice. Arrangements are being worked out between the various ministries to ensure that collaboration continues so that we can continue to work on these projects. This important trade link between Guyana and Brazil complements the equally important trade link which is being created between Guyana and Suriname. Only a few days ago, an advertisement was published in the newspapers inviting expression of interest in relation to the construction of the bridge across the Corentyne River. We already have a bridge across the Takutu River that bridges Guyana and Brazil. When we get this historic bridge across the Corentyne River, and the highway and the railway linkages between Guyana and Brazil materialize, you could imagine the trade potential that would explode when those projects take off. We have already been speaking about building an energy corridor stretching from Cayenne, Suriname, across Guyana, straight over to Brazil. That is a reality that is being pursued. Hydro, gas to shore, and other renewable sources, as well as fossil fuel. And then, of course, we are speaking about protecting our forests, our LCDS program, protecting the environment, because the Amazonia jungle and that forest which forms part of Guyana stretches over to Suriname, and it stretches over in a large way to Brazil. We have a comprehensive program while we are exploiting energy potential at the same time, and side by side, we are doing it in a sustainable way, and we are aggressively pursuing a low carbon development strategy that seeks to protect this huge mass of forests, the largest in the world, which extends from Suriname across Guyana and to Brazil. these projects, and that is why these linkages between our neighbors are so important. Bishop Edgil, our Minister of Public Works, recently visited Suriname, where the feasibility study and the design, the documents relating to feasibility study and design were inked by the two respective ministries. So while we are doing all the tedious work of going into the communities, addressing things like title and dealing with drainage and dealing with roads and streets and dams and the other things that are so critical to the day-to-day life of the Guyanese citizen, simultaneously we are pursuing the mega projects, the transformational projects that would put Guyana and put the people of Guyana in the place where we believe we deserve to be. Today also, I met with a large number of stakeholders in the real estate industry, real estate agents. They came and met with me with a request that they would like legal regulation to govern the way that real estate agents operate in Guyana and the way real estate is being conducted in Guyana. It is something that is long overdue. And the need for regulation to be brought to this industry has assumed even greater importance since we have become an oil and gas producer. Large companies are now here. Huge transactions are taking place involving the sale and transfer of lands. You have joint venture arrangements are being entered into to the tune of billions of dollars. And we have an unregulated real estate industry. As we have become an oil producing country, our regulatory framework and accountability framework and transparency network in respect of anti-money laundering and countering the financing of terrorism must also be constantly updated. And we are doing that. I intend to speak about that more often. The real estate industry is an important part of the AML CFT apparatus because it is true. Real estate can be a very fertile avenue for the laundering of money and the proceeds of crime. And therefore, we need to formally, and this is an outstanding obligation that we have, and it has now assumed greater importance because of the intense commercial activities taking place. It is important for us to incorporate formally into our legal structure and establish a regulatory framework the real estate industry and to regulate its operations so that the FIU and all the monitoring agencies can embrace the real estate sector as part of the AML CFT structure. The condominium bill, which is an important piece of related legislation, has already been laid in the National Assembly. And at the next sitting of the National Assembly, it is expected to be debated and passed. That is another piece of legislation that is preparing the legal landscape of Guyana for the takeoff that we are witnessing. We have to, I keep saying all the time, we have to update our laws, we have to revamp our legal system to ensure that it embraces the modern changes that are taking place, or else the legal system and the law will be left behind and commerce will run ahead. We can't allow that to happen. We must do it in sync, and the society must move forward as a whole. No society can advance without the law as an institution being there to regulate the conduct of human affairs. So we are doing that. My operator is signaling to me that we are running out of time, so let me go back to see if I can engage you quickly. Mr. AG, what is the status on the Mace fiasco in Parliament? Well, the Mace case, let me say quickly, the Mace, they filed legal proceedings suing the Attorney General, the Minister of Finance, the Speaker of the National Assembly, and the Clerk of the National Assembly. They are contending that the National Resource Fund Act was improperly passed, was unlawfully passed, because the Mace was not in place. Of course, you would have seen, and the live footage is still there, that they attempted to break the Mace and run away with the Mace, and when they didn't get through with that, they now turn around and say that the Mace wasn't in place, therefore Parliament can't make laws. I don't want to say much about it, but the case is coming up this Friday, in the High Court, Friday morning at 9 a.m. So hopefully I'll get an opportunity to speak just after the case to give you an update on what has transpired. But the case is on for hearing this Friday in the High Court at 9 a.m. So that is the update on that. So the comments are too many for me to speak on or to respond to at this point in time. We have come to program time. I want to thank you very much for being part of this program over the past hour or so that you have spent with me. I hope that I have been able to shed some light on some areas and provide you with information that would be useful and helpful to you. I want to thank you once again for joining me, and join us next week as we resume this discussion on the important issues in the news, and we continue to discuss the important events taking place in our country. Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of the evening. Enjoy the rest of the week. Take care and be safe. Thank you.